Okay, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm Paul Costello, the Director of the Council on Rural Development. It's a great honor to have you with us to consider a proposition for the future of Vermont. Welcome to this release and announcement of this proposition. If you're a member of the press, please mark your affiliation on your name tag. We'll be taking questions at the end from the press. At VCRD, and with the action team we're going to be introducing today, we see the challenges of our time, from COVID recovery to advancing racial justice and equity, to ensuring the strength of our democracy in a time where we can't take it for granted, building climate change solutions, and looking to some of these fundamental problems that are international, national, and Vermont-wide in scope, that they cannot defeat us, but they compel us as Vermonters to unite, to build unity across lines, to stand together and take the level of action that's necessary for us to address them as a people in this time. The Vermont Proposition is a starting point for work to build the best possible future for the people and communities of Vermont. Proposition's been built by VCRD with literally thousands of people contributing to the writing of this document. It's based on interviews with hundreds of individuals, written contributions from more than 1,000 people, inputs from local, regional, statewide COVID recovery sessions, from 700 participants in the Summit on the Future of Vermont, ideas from partners, policy councils, and the tens of thousands of people who've put themselves on the line for their communities over the last generation to drive Vermont forward. The proposition is based on the idea that working together, Vermonters can advance strategies, policies, and investments to renew public engagement, advance justice, resilience, strong communities, healthy environment, and a sustainable economy that works for now. And this is a moment for collective action for Vermont's future. It's a starting point to promote action over the next 3 years that will be essential for a strong and prosperous future over the next 30. To lead the proposition forward, VCRD has built a deep stakeholder analysis from all parts of Vermont, from the full diversity of Vermonters, to bring together a creative team. Today, we're going to introduce and announce that team, the Future of Vermont Action Team. The action team has formally adopted the proposition as a working framework to drive central points of common agenda for the future of Vermont. It will convene partners and stakeholders to drive these elements forward. It will lead nonpartisan policy and public advocacy and speak to the unity of these propositions, these elements, to drive Vermont forward. We're here today to release the proposition, to introduce the action team, to invite all Vermonters to join in this movement as members of the Partnership for the Future of Vermont, to work together to drive systemic change at scale, to advance the proposition and advance this work for Vermont's future. In a moment, it'll be my pleasure to introduce Jenna Kolosky, the Community and Policy Manager at VCRD, who will quickly overview the provisions of the proposition. We'll then hear from our action team chair, Charlie Hancock, 3 members of the team, Dan Smith, Monique Priestley, and Don Turner, and then Brian Lowe, the incoming Executive Director of VCRD. It's a great honor to be part of this conversation with you all, key members, friends, partners, dedicated to the common future of the state. So I will now introduce Jenna Kolosky to walk through an overview from a very high level, the different elements of the proposition. Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks so much, Paul, and good morning, everyone. Just really exciting to look around the screen and see all these familiar faces from communities that we've worked with over the years, and of course, many of you as really key contributors to this proposition and to the conversation. So really nice to see you. So as Paul said, over a year ago now, we put up a draft of the proposition and asked for feedback, and we heard from thousands of people. And so the draft that we're launching today is our best take at kind of taking all of that input from thousands of folks, all of what we heard in the summit, and integrating that into the draft to share back with you today and to share with the action team as they take next steps. So really a quick look, and as I'm going through this list, know that these are kind of chapter headings of a broader document that describes in more detail each of these areas, and you can find that at futureofvermont.org. So that's where you'll find this list as well as the text behind each of these that explains a little bit more about what's intended in each element. But for a quick review, as we heard from Vermonters around the state, we heard that Vermonters really want to see an increase in broadband access and also to use digital tools and use that connection to better connect to their community and to support local businesses. We also heard loud and clear across every conversation we had that we need to address racism in Vermont, and we need to do the hard work of building safe and welcoming communities, especially for people of color in the state, and at the same time celebrate the diversity that we already have in our state today. We heard many times that people are very concerned and thinking of climate change as the defining issue of our time, and that we need to get to work now to address that challenge, but also that we can come together to address that, and that Vermont can in fact be a leader and an innovator in that arena. We heard that we have to work to close the gap between the wealthiest Vermonters and wealthy communities and those that are really struggling to get by in our state, and need to promote opportunities for all Vermonters. And within that text, there's a lot there about housing as a really key element of meeting that challenge. We need to ensure access to childcare, to quality, affordable childcare for all who need it, and all.
Jenna, you're muted for some reason. Sorry.
It keeps muting me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll go back to the ensuring access to childcare for all that want it in our state, affordable, quality childcare. There's also a piece around education and opening up a statewide dialogue on education to ensure that all students in our state can learn and thrive. There's also a look at that Vermont must focus on strengthening our local businesses, but also encouraging that next generation of innovation and entrepreneurship and workforce for the future of our state. We also had a lot of conversation with folks about the need to better support regional coordination and improve the efficiency about how we provide services in our state, but also to think about how we best plan for the long term and identify ways that we can come together around, rather than 1 or 2 year cycles of planning, look at the long term and what we want to accomplish in 5 or 10 years in Vermont. And then something that we hear over and over again in conversations with Vermonters, that we value our working landscape and we must support our farm and forest enterprises in the state while also conserving our lands and waters. And then finally, we heard from many Vermonters a call for a renewal of civic engagement in our state and civic dialogue, and also empowering new leaders and a diverse set of leaders that can lead us forward in the next generation. So with that, I'll turn it back to Paul.
Thank you so much, Jenna. There's a lot of depth around each of those concepts, with a lot of voice that has been digested together from these thousands of people who've participated in this process. Please read them through. We don't expect everyone to agree with every detail of what they see in this. Think of it rather as a holistic attempt to bring together a big collective vision and something of an architectural framework for how we can move together over the next 3 years to drive change at the scale demanded by the circumstances that we face as a people. I'm very excited to introduce the chair of the action team, who stepped up from Montgomery, Vermont, Charlie Hancock. So Charlie, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your leadership in moving this initiative forward.
Well, thank you, Paul. And thanks everybody for taking the time out of your morning to join us today for the launch of this. As Paul said, I'm Charlie Hancock. I'm a consulting forester based way up here in Montgomery. I'm also the chairman of the Montgomery Select Board. And that was a role in which I first saw the power of the Vermont Council on Rural Development's work firsthand during a community visits program here. That project brought together community members to set a common vision and catalyzed action in our town around a major public works project to spur economic development, increase access to affordable housing, and better position our community to prosper in the coming decades. That process clearly illustrated something that I once heard Paul say, and that was, and it stuck with me ever since, and that's that Washington, D.C. isn't going to save us, and neither is Montpelier. The change we need is only going to come from a community of people who set a vision for themselves and then act to affect it, whether that's community of people in one town or the larger community of people who comprise this whole great state. I accepted to lead this work because I wholeheartedly believe that. I've seen it work, and I know that we can and will accomplish truly great transformational change in the months and years to come. The Vermont Proposition is a bold platform crafted by Vermonters for common action to achieve a prosperous and resilient future that works for everyone, and which will serve as a foundation for our work to ensure a vibrant future for the next generation who call Vermont home. There's a quote that I love from John Muir that reads, "When you try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe." The Vermont Proposition recognizes just how interconnected the challenges we face as a state are, and it offers broad-based direction for the state going forward, not focusing on any one single issue, but acknowledging that each issue is hitched to the other. To guide this work, we've assembled an action team comprised of members who bring expertise in one or more areas and who are committed to pushing for progress on the proposition as a whole. The team, a full list of which, including short bios, can be found at futureofvermont.org, includes Sue Beatty of Vermont Hospitality and Vermont Independent Restaurants, Ben Doyle from Preservation Trust of Vermont, Akia Gillespie from the Rutland Regional Medical Center, Bruce Hennessy of Maple Wind Farm in Richmond, Rich Holschka of the Atawee Project, representing the Abenaki peoples, Al Johnson-Kurtz from Change the Story Vermont, Joyce Judy of Community College of Vermont, Pet Kiomenivan of Vermont Professionals of Color, Colby LaMarche, the former head of the Burlington Republican Party, Sarah Lunderville of Vermont Center for Independent Living, Michael Livingston, the principal at the Tunbridge Central School, Neil Lunderville of Vermont Gas Systems, Tyler Mesha of Pine Ridge Consulting, Monique Priestley from the Space on Main and Center for Women and Enterprise, Curtis Reed from the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity, Allie Richards of Let's Grow Kids, Amy Richardson from the Richardson Farm, Chuck Ross, the former Secretary of Agriculture and State Director for Senator Leahy, Dan Smith of the Vermont Community Foundation, Lori Smith of the Vermont Futures Project, and Don Turner, the Milton Town Manager. This diverse and dynamic group of 24 leaders from around the state will identify ways to support and catalyze existing efforts and focus new attention and resources on areas where new action can spur success. And like I said previously, I know that we can and that we will accomplish truly transformational change in the months and years to come. Thanks very much, and back to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Charlie, and thank you for stepping up to put yourself on the line to lead this effort over the next 2 years. We deeply appreciate it. It's now my pleasure to introduce 3 members of the Future of Vermont Action Team to share their perspective on the proposition, what some of the key elements are that interest them, and also a little bit about their perspective on the initiative as a whole. And we'll start with Dan Smith, President of the Vermont Community Foundation. Hi, Dan.
Good morning, everybody. It's really lovely to see so many familiar faces and have so many people join the call and participate in the launch event. So I'm thrilled to be a part of the task force focused on this set of questions and the proposition for Vermont's future. Our role at the Community Foundation, our mission is to bring people and resources together to make a difference in Vermont. We work with a constellation of philanthropic Vermonters who want to help make communities stronger, not necessarily over a year, but over the course of a year and over the course of decades. We've done that by focusing on closing the opportunity gap that exists in Vermont by race, by place, by families, and economic background. What's really exciting to me about this scope of work that's been laid out by the Vermont Council on Rural Development is that it's not VCRD's agenda, it's not VCF's agenda, it's not anybody's specific agenda. It is a complex collision of ideas that is the product of Vermonters reflecting back through the community visit process, through the work of the last 2 years, what their hopes and dreams are for Vermont going forward. It is, there's no one element of the proposition to me that stands out, because what is exciting about it is that it is that muddy alchemy of what exists in our communities across perspectives. We're at a time where confidence in institutions and confidence in our ability as a country and as a state to move forward, is at a low point. And so this sets an architecture based on the voices of Vermonters against which we can hold ourselves a bit accountable relative to our progress over time, not our progress over a year or two, but our progress over decades. And we can recognize that the strengths and the values of the Vermont Proposition 10, 20, 30 years ago will necessarily look different to validate a proposition that sets the stage for what progress and resilience and opportunity look like 10, 20, and 30 years ahead. And I think that's really exciting. So what inspires me about it both is the breadth and the boldness of it, but also that it's grounded in the voices of our neighbors. They have set their voices, their stories, their hopes and desires have set the stage for what progress will look like. So I'm incredibly excited to see where this leads. It is undoubtedly ambitious, but I think together as we emerge from the pandemic, as we look out over the course of decades, the intersection of these propositions, the way they feed together, set the stage for a Vermont that is undoubtedly more resilient and undoubtedly stronger and undoubtedly more inviting to more people, and offers a sense of belonging to people, to many people who don't necessarily feel as connected to place as they may be. I think my final thought is one that sort of came to me over the day yesterday and last night is, in so many cases, so many situations, we've borrowed from the future to pay for the present, right? Whether it's ecologically and in terms of climate, whether it's in terms of higher education and what we ask young people to do in order to be economically resilient. There's so many examples of the ways in which we borrow from the future to pay for the present. This scale of these 10 propositions is undoubtedly ambitious, but they offer a way of thinking about borrowing from the present to pay for the future and set the table for Vermonters of all backgrounds, of all races, of all experiences to connect to place and see and feel a sense of potential and a sense of opportunity in their communities. So I'm thrilled to be a part of it, and I really am looking forward to seeing where it goes. And thank you, Charlie, for taking on the duties of chair. And it's going to be a wonderful process.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you so much for your leadership. Deeply appreciate it. We have Monique Priestley here from the Space on Main. Monique.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited about the proposition in general and the team that's already come together. I'm really excited. So my name is Monique Priestley. I started the Space on Main, co-working entrepreneurship and community space in Bradford, Vermont. I'm also the COVID business recovery project manager for the Center for Women in Enterprise Vermont, helping women to start and grow businesses. Whether through the propositions focused on reducing economic disparities, combating racism, and celebrating diversity, or cultivating entrepreneurial opportunities, it is critical that Vermont addresses the needs of its underserved and marginalized populations. Whether that's serving those of lower socioeconomic means, women, people of color, people with indigenous populations, individuals identifying as LGBTQ, people with differing physical and cognitive abilities, and so on. There are entire communities of individuals that are lacking the support they need to thrive, to start businesses, and to engage in civic opportunities. This hurts Vermont's ability to thrive and to grow. Luckily, Vermont is an intricately connected state, navigating these propositions at a time that more people than ever, although maybe not enough with broadband, are accessible with the click of a mouse. The proposition is a powerful collection of necessary goals. I'm most excited at the prospect of engaging people who have never felt heard and people who feel like they don't have agency over where they fit in the future of Vermont. It is a perfect time to welcome and encourage new voices and emergent leaders to participate. I hope each of you will join us in this work and that you will boost up those in your networks who have yet to share their voices, their needs, and their dreams. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monique. And then I'd like to introduce Don Turner, a Milton Town manager, who we've gotten to know both in the community side of our work and in public policy, and deeply appreciate Don being with us today. Thanks, Don.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good morning, everyone. As Paul said, I'm Don Turner. I'm currently the town manager in Milton. I'm also a member of the Vermont Natural Resources Board. Served 13 years in the legislature as a minority leader, and I've been on the fire department since I was 17 in town. So been a lot. I spent my whole life really trying to make our community in Vermont a better place to live, work, and raise our families. And I'm extremely excited to have been asked to be part of this really unique and exciting project, the Vermont Proposition. I want to thank the thousands of Vermonters that have contributed their thoughts and ideas to this campaign, to this affirmational proposition. I also want to thank Paul and everyone at VCRD for taking on this Vermont Proposition project and allowing me to be part of it. I feel that adopting the proposition is essential to the future of our great state, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve on the Vermont Futures team. I believe that now is the time for us, for me, and I'm going to be working so that everyone that lives in our state feels like they belong here. I want to work to strengthen local business and our workforce because we know that's essential. I have worked and I will continue to work on the housing issues that we talk about here. And one thing that is really essential to me is renewing civility, civic engagement at the local level. You know, there is some good civil, some service, but I see that we need a lot more of that. And it's essential that we strengthen the trust that Vermonters have in their leaders and people that are leading Vermont in many ways, in many organizations, whether they're state agencies, local agencies, nonprofits, for-profits, whatever it is, we have to restore trust. So today, I ask for your support and assistance as we work to incorporate these broad and affirmational statements into Vermont's culture, because now is the time. We can do this. And I want to thank Paul and the team for taking on this incredible challenge. And I want to thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Don. Really appreciate having you in the team. It's now my pleasure to introduce Brian Lowe, the incoming Executive Director of VCRD. Brian.
Hey, good morning, Paul. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the speakers, and thank you, folks, for joining here today. It's my pleasure to talk a little bit about the partnership, which is already formed and growing to support this effort. And I thought it made sense to kind of take a small step back and just remind people of the different components of what we're announcing today. Paul and Jenna have laid out the proposition and the 10 transformational goals that are the result of thousands and thousands of ideas from thousands of Vermonters. And that if we can seize this moment over the next 3 years, we can really put our state collectively on a much better trajectory. Charlie has announced the action team, right? The group that is steering this effort, the people who have already stepped forward to help us sort through these different complex and interrelated challenges. And I'm going to speak briefly about the partnership, which is a broad coalition of individuals, organizations, and businesses around the state, already hundreds strong, that are coming together to support this work in various ways, through collaboration, through advocacy, through different communication and different ways to engage and support these different transformational goals. This partnership, which I think Nick is going to pop another link in the chat, it's at the futureofvermont.org, is a way for you to get engaged. We can give you updates, opportunities for engagement in ways that work for you. These are things that we need to tackle together. So I'd strongly encourage you to add your name to that partnership list. Paul Costello often says that democracy is an experiment, and it is an experiment. It's also a test for every generation to stand up to the challenges of the day, to work together, and to leave a better future for those that come after us. This is our test, as Don said. We need to stand up together and address some of these problems collaboratively. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here, to be part of the incredible VCRD team, to build on what Paul has done. And I'd really encourage you to sign up and join this partnership so we can get to this work together. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brian, and welcome. We're at a catalytic and historic moment in this country, in the world, and we all have a responsibility and a duty as citizens in our democracy to work together and to make that power of democracy real for our time. It's a great honor to be part of that challenge with each of you. I'd love to turn this openness to the press and to members of the press with questions who want more information as they think about some of the implications of this work. So I'd ask people to raise your hands and we will take those questions.
And there are a lot of people on the call right now. So if you're a member of the press and you want to raise your hand electronically, that should shoot you to the sort of first screen so we can see you rather than your flesh and blood hand. And you can do that at the bottom of your screen. There's a tab that says reactions. And if you click that, there should be the option to raise hand.
Jessica Lee Smith.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, let me just make sure I have it run right. I just wanted to ask you guys, I don't even know if this is the right place to ask it. Thank you so much, by the way, for having me here. And thank you, Paul. And congratulations to the new gentleman who's going to be the head of this. I would love to join this now. I'm not like a government person. But I consider myself independent press and I'm a former actress. I just wanted to lend myself to anything at all that any of the farmers need or any of the agricultural system needs. I would do voiceovers, I would do commercials, I would do anything for you guys. And I just wanted to find out what Vermont is going to do about getting their own brand as opposed to letting the farmers now live without the major buyers that they had. You know, that we should make a deal and sign a deal with all the Vermont schools that the only food the schools will carry is food from local farms.
Thank you, Jessica. There's an involved discussion, and it's really important to go beyond the headlines that Jenna hit upon and recognize that there's an evolved aggregation of thinking in the section on the working landscape and the future of agriculture. Tremendous work is going forward already to dramatically increase the amount of local food we're consuming. We've gone from 5% to over 13% in the last 10 years. We can go much further than that. We also have a major transition around the way dairy functions in the state. There are clear recommendations within that the content there around aggregating and advancing production so that we can get a higher cost per milk to the farmer, which is fundamental to the long-term viability and to their ability to advance positive environmental outcomes. I'll turn to Kevin O'Connor. Kevin, great to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm here for Vermont Digger. And my question is, will the team be meeting on a regular basis? If so, do you know how often? And likewise, will the team or the partnership or the proposition be reporting out to the public on a regular basis?
Charlie, you want to start on that one?
Yeah, sorry, just finding my unmute button. Yeah. So the team will be meeting on a regular basis. We're still trying to hammer out exactly kind of when that's going to be and how it's going to play out, whether it's going to be monthly or bi-monthly. But we will be meeting regularly to kind of figure out what to tackle next and how do we kind of move this work forward, kind of acting as stewards of this proposition to reach out and catalyze greater impact, because it's not just the 23 of us. It's looking at all Vermonters, all players in these spaces to bring them together. So we will have regular meetings. And your question about how to report back out is a great one, and one that I don't have an answer for you at this point, but one that I definitely am going to keep close to my head and think about how to best keep Vermonters up to date on this work. I know we have a website in place for the proposition, so I'm sure we'll be sharing a lot of material there for folks to check in on. I assume that we'll also be reaching back out to the media and the press to kind of elevate and share out successes that we've had. So I'd say for now, watch the website, and we'll be back in touch as we move this ball forward. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Charlie. Keith Whitcomb.
Hi. Yeah, Kevin probably touched on this question a little bit already, so I apologize. But what is kind of holding this process accountable? Like, do you have any metrics for success? Do you plan on, reporting at someone at some point and say, we accomplished this, didn't accomplish that? I'm just kind of wondering what keeps this in action, not being, not that I would think this would happen, but just something that kind of gets forgotten about or shelved at some point.
No, it's a great question, Keith, and we recognize the importance of it. Lori Smith is with us, who I know is on this call. Lori leads the Vermont Futures Project and has done great diligence in data directed around the future of the economy, working in conjunction with the State Chamber of Commerce. We love having her as an ally and the potential of building more data analytics into this process. We also have been working with the Vermont office, the Office of Engagement at UVM, which has deep resources in research capacity that can ally with this process. In the current position, we have the big goals and the big propositions towards action. As we go forward, we'll be convening around the different elements and parts of the work that are prioritized by the action team. We're going to go from a big set of global statements, which we want to see moved forward together, but also look at some of the granularity and needs for convening key partners or for potentially positive political advocacy around key elements that need to be forwarded. And in both those arenas, we're going to need to do a much deeper dive on data analytics. And we will also be tracking the advance of each initiative and each part of this work over time. So we have our hands full, and this is going to be a real systems approach that's going to need much more data as we move forward. So thanks for that question.
Thank you.
I see Andrew McKeever from GNAT TV.
Good morning. Thank you, Paul. I guess I was just curious if you could expand a little bit on, you sort of touched on this in your last answer to Keith there. What will be the role of the legislature in helping you move this forward? And I guess in particular, I was wondering if you saw some of the propositions interfacing with some of the ARPA funding that has become available to the state. Just was wondering if you saw a major lobbying push in Montpelier as being part of the activity the group would be doing come next year.
Thanks so much for that question. This is a purely nonpartisan effort. So we're not interested in electoral politics, and we're not interested in like arguing against people. It's an aspiratory document that shares a big picture direction that we will be bringing to the legislature. And in fact, we've met with the pro tem and speaker as we've met with leadership in Governor Scott's administration already. They're all well aware of this as an initiative, and that we will be carrying positive advocacy to move different elements of this proposition forward. That is lobbying, but it's clearly not. It's clearly nonpartisan, and we will be working to systemically do that over time. There may be key parts of the proposition that need more of that kind of advocacy than others. And we're going to be setting priorities and evaluating what's necessary to advance both the proposition as a whole and key elements as we go forward. And Charlie, I don't know if there's more that you would want to say about that, but feel free.
Yeah, I think, I think the legislature is going to be a really key partner in this work, but that's what they are, just one partner, right? They have tools, they have resources, they have actions they can take, at their disposal. That we will certainly look toward to kind of move parts of the proposition forward. But there's other players, that are in the private or nonprofit space too, that we'll look to equally as well to kind of help, shepherd these things forward. So I would see them as a critical partner, but just one partner in this work, certainly.
Yeah, the one thing I would add is that we're at this cultural moment as well, where climate solutions aren't all about what Washington, D.C. decides to do. They're also about what happens in Milton, Brattleboro, and Island Pond, and how we act together as a people. Likewise, the issue of making our communities inviting places for people of color and for immigrants to Vermont to live, and recognizing the diversity and celebrating that diversity in a multicultural society. These are things that that aren't legislated top down. They're part of a larger dialogue around who we are as a people and how we work together. And so this initiative is designed to have momentum at all those levels. So thank you for that question, Andrew. Are there other questions from the press? Other questions from the press? Gary Durr, did you have a question? I see Keith Whitcomb has another question.
Hi, yeah, I was just kind of curious. So after today, like, what is the next thing that happens? And kind of related to that, what is like the first thing, you know, Joe public might notice about this happening in their lives? Like, do we have any idea when that we might start seeing things happen or hearing things happen? Or
good question. The action team has met twice. It's formed, it's geared up, it has adopted the proposition in its current form as a working document. We know it's not perfect. We know it's going to change over time. But for today, we have a strong document to be working from to promote it. Some of the next steps will be to look at key elements that need further convening and action. And I expect there will be press on different work that's being driven forward that way. And there will also be messages to legislators that we will be potentially doing some presentation to committees and to committee chairs over time, and reaching out to different groups of leadership, including members of the new partnership that we're inviting people to join today, to be part of initiatives either on political advocacy or to advance strategic direction on key elements of this work. So there's an enormous amount of work to do that's currently teed up, and the action team will be making decisions to set that framework in the next in its next meetings. So Charlie or Brian, if you have more to say about that, we'll welcome you to chip in.
Hey, thanks, Paul. I would just add, I think it's a great question. The action team is meeting in October, and it's a pretty high-powered group, as you can see from the list that Charlie read. That is a group that is going to be demanding clarity and helping us set priorities. It's a group that I think is going to work with us to develop metrics in those priority areas to measure our progress. And it is, it's a complicated, interrelated set of transformational goals that Vermonters have identified. So tracking progress is a challenge, but I think I have high confidence that the action team is going to be able to prioritize our work where it's needed most across those 10 different goals.
Thank you. Charlie?
Yeah, I think Paul and Brian hit it right on the head as far as kind of what's next. And as far as kind of, what would Joe Public see? The action team are stewards of this work, stewards of this vision. And we're going to be looking back out to the public to help support and move it forward. And so we've got, thousands of members who contributed to this so far. We're trying to build the partnership even more. So one of the things we're going to be doing is going back out to the community that is everyone that lives in this state to look to them to help advance the work. It's not us pulling levers and pushing things. It's us, figuring out where those agents of catalyst are and where the points of intersectionality are that we can identify and help really kind of just, help to advance the work. So we'll be looking back out to the people to advance the work, not just tell them what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Any last questions from members of the press? I see Jessica Lee Smith, and we could take one or two more questions. Jessica.
Yes, I'm sorry. Let me get you on here, make sure I couldn't hear you. I was just going to ask you guys also about, I know that one of the problems with the farmers here is the amount of money that they get taxed every year. And when people move into their areas, they get charged more and more. And it's too much pressure on them. They don't have the money the people that are moving here have. What can be done to put money on the side from the government with all the funds they have to put in some type of fund so that the farms are saved and nobody's in danger of losing their farms based on rich people moving here?
That's a fundamental question. There's not a quick answer to that in the proposition itself, though it does talk about advancing diversification, value-added production, in-state branding, branding beyond Vermont, increasing the price of milk, and different elements like that that would all contribute to a sustainable agricultural future.
But Paul, don't you think that they should take some of those millions that they got and put it in a fund for the farmers, just to preserve the farms that are already there? I know that Vermont Land Trust has gotten together, and a lot of the farms have gotten together before to put their money in to save another farm. Why can't the government do it when that is going to be a major source of income? The farms are so important to the future of the income in Vermont. That they could be integrated into everything. I mean, we could do everything from within instead of keep waiting for people to come from without. You know what I'm saying? But not you guys. You guys, it sounds incredible. I'm just wondering if the government hears this, if they could give some funding. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear your question and appreciate it. And it's not, there's not a fundamental big grant program in the proposition today. Appreciate your thought. We're really more looking for questions from the press than new ideas that we should be including in the proposition right now, because we've been listening hard for a couple of years here. Any last press question? I'd love to thank everyone for coming today. We deeply appreciate the mutual leadership that moves Vermont forward. The fact that people on all facets of looking at Vermont are bound together with this mutual patriotism of place, that we are together at a historic threshold where we've come through significant challenge, where there's major opportunities to think bigger about how we work as a democracy, how we invest in our future. What are the fundamental things that are going to advance racial justice and opportunity for all Vermonters into the future? And that working collectively, we have this tremendous power for change, a tremendous power built on our care for one another, our love for this place, and our hopes for a stronger, brighter, better future for all. So it's a great honor to be part of that conversation with you all. Keep in touch. Join the partnership. Know that we'll be in touch and we'll look for your leadership, your ideas, your energy, and together we can make historic change for Vermont. So thank you very much for being part of our discussion today, and we'll be in touch. Thanks and best.